Hey guys, and welcome to a new video here on Phloshop. My name is Joseph. In today's video, I'm going to be retouching one of these images from start to finish. So from basic cleanup to frequency separation, dodge and burn, finally color grade. You're going to see the entire process. I really got positive feedback from my previous watch me edits. So this is going to be episode 2. So if you want to see how this image is going to turn out, I have no idea myself. Do stick through to the end of the video. Now we're going to start off in Adobe Bridge, and I'm using this to select the image that I want. I have already selected the one that I want for edit, but I just want to go through to show you guys what I was thinking about before I selected the final image. So when I started shooting, because there's no behind the scenes, I'm using this just so you know the camera settings I started with and what I was thinking before finally settling for the moody lighting that I later on went for. So when I started, I knew I wanted to get the leaves in the foreground to be a little bit blur, and I hadn't really settled on the kind of composition I wanted or where I wanted the leaves to be and how it was going to interact with hair. So the very first shot was a little bit too wide for me because I could see her legs, and it was looking a bit awkward to me because of the way it was being chopped off. And you can see that it's not really like the leaves were blocking it or anything. It was just the fact that I didn't frame her properly. Also, if you look at the settings, I was shooting at f1.4, 1/125 shutter speed, and my ISO was at 1000, and that's because my strobe light was set to the lowest power, and I was using my 36-inch octabox from Glow. You're gonna be seeing that in a behind the scenes I'm gonna post hopefully next week, doing another shoot with the same model, so stay tuned for that. So the lighting on this was set to 1/128 on my Godox AD600BM. The next thing I did was I didn't touch the lighting, I didn't touch anything else. I just moved the plant a little closer and also asked it to step forward just a little bit, just so I can get the composition that I was looking for. So that you see that if you look at the previous one and where the closer shot is, the framing looked a little bit more intense. It looked more intimate. You felt like you're a part of it. Okay, and because she stepped forward, the lighting on her got really bright, and that's because again my ISO is at 1000, so that's already too bright for what I was looking for. I just wanted to get like a flat image initially, but later on looking at it, I felt if it was a little bit more moody, it would add a lot more interest to the image. So the next thing I did was to bring my ISO down to 500, and then also take my shutter speed from 1/125 to 1/160, and already the composition was looking good. The lighting felt a little better, especially coming from here to here. You can see the mood in the image on the right looks really good, and I knew that was what I wanted to settle for. But again, I could still see her knees, and it was just bugging me a little bit. I felt the composition was not right, so I switched and got a little lower and also moved the plants just a little bit closer to her as well, just so it could cover up her knees and make it look like she's in the bush, sort of. And just to add more interest to the image at the end. So this is what I settled for as my final composition. So the rest of the images are going to be based on this composition, but just the posing and things are going to vary a little bit. So I'm selecting all of them, and I'm going to let you know how I arrived at my final image. So looking at the image on the left, the first thing I didn't like was the fact that I cropped off her arm right here, and it wasn't really going to fit, because again I'm going to crop the image to fit Instagram. So if I'm already losing parts, I feel I'm going to crop a little bit too much and lose the subject when I do so. So that was a little bit awkward for me, especially since I'm already cropping at her knees. I just didn't want too many crops of the model to happen in the frame. So this first image was out. Now I was looking at the next two, which are really similar, but I like the way her arm was on her waist right here, and here it was like she was probably fidgeting, or it was in between poses, so it wasn't really a good shot for me. Plus her head tilt was also a little bit too much, so I took that one out as well. Now these are the ones that we're left with, and looking at them, I felt this was a little bit too open. So the moment you see the image, you're drawn to her, which is obvious, and kind of like the idea for the shoot anyways, to be drawn to her. But I didn't like the way the plants were a little bit revealing, especially around this area. I wanted to create some form of mystery in the viewer's eye, so having her face the camera so much wasn't too mysterious in my opinion, so I also made that go. Now I like these compositions especially because of the way she had tilted her body and you could see the curves. So again, she's a woman, we want to enhance her curves, so this was the idea that we settled on, and in the pose that we made her stay in, whilst I took a lot more. Again, I was talking about leaving room to the mind's eye to finish up with the image. So this image was not it for me, especially because we could see this entire area, and I didn't really want that. I wanted to cover up just a little bit, but also create a little bit more room for your mind to fill up the gaps you know, in the image. So this was also out for me. Now these three, it was a little bit tough for me to select, but again, because of the first instance that I gave about the crop, the one on the right wasn't it for me, and so I had to let that go because of the little crop that was happening right here. So that also went out for me. So we're left with these two, and these are like the final, very similar images, and I ended up choosing the one on the right. Now the reason why I did that was because over here, I know I wanted to cover up her lower part a little bit, but this was just too covered, and so you can't really see what's going on in that area. Plus her head tilt also away from the camera wasn't really something I was looking for. Plus her hand in her hair was occupying too much space, and I think it was just in the frame so much and really close to her face, and so you're not really staying around this area, because already the way I lit this, the light was not really hitting her face, and I intentionally did that because I wanted to have very soft feathered light on her. So I wasn't aiming the light on her face, I was aiming it on her chest, because I know in post I can lift up the shadows around here, and that's gonna match pretty nicely. So this area wasn't it for me. Her hand in the shot also wasn't it for me, and she looking away from the camera wasn't it for me. And then we finally settled on this particular image. So this was shot at 1.4, shutter speed 1/160, and finally the ISO was at 160. And I think my strobe power was also at 1/128 still, and that is what I used for the entire shot. I shot this on my Canon EOS R with a Sigma 85 1.4. So this is the final image that we're going to retouch. So I'm going to send this into Photoshop and then start working. But before that, I'm going to move into Adobe Bridge, and then we're going to start tweaking the image. So now that we have opened the image up in Bridge, the first thing I want to do is correct the lighting. So what I want to do is just fix the darkening around here and just try and level it up to match the rest of the image. I'm going to click on my graduated filter and we'll just drag this down, and somewhere here works well. And if you want to adjust that, what you do is just now begin to move the exposure. So I can darken it, also move the shadows and the highlights if I want. But in this case, what I want to do is up the exposure a tiny bit and also open up the shadows just like that, and keep the highlights where they were at 0. Still open up the exposure a little bit, open up the shadows as well. And now I can just go back to the hand tool, come back to my graduated filter, and then create a new one all the way down this time, and bring the shadows down and bring the exposure down as well. Before, after, I kind of like the exposure and where it is now. What do I need to do next? Probably work on temperature. So maybe bring it down to, let's say, 5000, and that's really helping with your skin tones. And maybe up the magenta a tiny bit or bring it down. Actually, let me just keep the magenta where it was and increase the temperature to maybe 5100. Yeah, just like that. I'm just gonna add a little bit more contrast and then darken the shadows ever so slightly. Maybe bring the exposure down a tiny bit. I'm just gonna hit open image, and it's gonna open up inside of Photoshop. Okay, so now that we're inside Photoshop, the first thing I want to do is the healing process. I know the things I want to fix, obviously, but I want to mark them out for you guys to see. So zooming in to the image a little bit, I'm going to create a new blank layer and just hit B for my brush tool, and then just select an obvious color, like something that's a little bit different. So maybe like a blue, and I can start drawing and showing you guys what I want to fix. The first thing I want to do is reduce the stray hairs that are around here. So you're going to see me do that. And I want to fill in this area just so the hair looks a little bit more fuller. And what I want to do next is maybe get rid of the hairs here. I don't know if I will, but that's something I want to do. Now smoothing out this area just a tiny bit. Also liquefy her arm, so probably push this part out, push this part out, push this part in a little bit. Just trying to straighten her arm overall. Next thing I would do is just round this area a little bit with liquefy as well, so we have like a better hair shape, and maybe just bring this area out a tiny bit. Aside that, everything else looks fine. I'm going to use Dodge and Bend to smoothing out the pressure that she's put down here. Next thing I'll do then would be to fix her eyes. I can see that, for example, the reflector is showing in this eye, but then we don't have that many catch lights in this eye, so I will copy these catch lights and paste them here just to add a little bit more balance, make her eyes look more interesting. And then I'll fix up some of the blemishes on her skin. She doesn't really have that many, and I want this to be a little bit natural, so I'm not really going to do so much heavy post-production work or skin retouching. Also brighten up her eyes just a tiny bit and remove just a little bit of the marks. You can see her neck and her face doesn't really match, so this is like if I just swatch this out, you can see this is the color tone on the face. If I click on the neck, you can see it's a little bit grayed out, but if I click on the arm, it's a little bit brighter than here. So those are the little things that I would fix as well. So you're going to see me do all those things in a couple of steps. So let's just jump right into skin healing and removing the blemishes that I find in the image. So I'm going to delete this layer, and we're going to start with the healing process. So we're going to start off with healing and fixing some of the blemishes. So I'm going to start by creating a new blank layer. Rename that into healing. So I'm going to use my clone stamp to first of all fix the stray hairs. So I'm going to press S for the clone stamp tool, and with a flow of about 76% and a soft edge, I can just start painting. Okay, so this backdrop, I bought this from someone who makes it here in Ghana called Pixelate. So if you want to get your own canvas backdrops, he customizes. So I told him I wanted a gray backdrop, and he's the same one that made the red one for me for the previous Watch Me Edit video series. So I used that for a beauty shoot, and I have a gray one that I am testing out as well. So this was like a test for the background, and I really like it. So if you want to get that, you can, from Pixelate. I'm going to put his link down in the description so you can check him out and get your canvas backdrop. Alright, so all I'm using is the clone stamp tool and trying to get rid of these stray hairs, and it's really simple because the background itself has texture. I don't really care if it's not matching, and that's the advantage of this, and that's why it's a very easy process. So I'm just sampling. So I'm going to switch to my healing brush tool this time and use that to get rid of the stray hair right here. Okay, I'm going to switch back to my clone stamp tool, and I'm going to sample in here and then just fill in the gap right there, and do the same thing here, and do the same thing in here. Because I don't want it to touch her fingers, I'm going to zoom in a little bit and make sure the brush is really soft and small. Sample and then just paint like that. So when I zoom out, it just looks like her hair is a lot fuller. The next thing is to target the blemishes and now start working on them. So hit J for my healing brush tool, and I'm going to start by removing this and then getting to her skin and then just removing like the really obvious blemishes. So hitting Alt to sample and clicking a good skin area and then painting over the areas that I want to correct. And you also notice I am not sampling like her forehead and painting around her eyebrow area. That's because the textures are not going to match. So anytime I want to sample, I'm sampling from really close to the area I want to correct, because generally the textures over there should match the area I'm correcting, and that's going to help make it look a lot more seamless. So it's not really obvious that you've done work here or you've done such and such around this area. So I switched to my clone stamp tool because the healing brush is bleeding the color in, but the clone stamp tool is just going to clone exactly what I'm sampling, and that's going to allow me to just fade this in a little bit and let it look a little bit more realistic. I also want to get rid of the lines, so I'm just cloning that away, and it's really that simple. So still with the clone stamp tool, I'm just going to remove some of these things, just like that. And that's all I'm going to be doing. So I'm going to forward this part. So all I'm doing is just sampling good areas and painting over the areas I want to get rid of. And I'm still using the clone stamp tool for all this. I haven't switched to the healing brush. That's because I know I want to make permanent changes to the areas that I'm correcting. And I want to make direct copies. I don't want it to blend in like how the healing brush will handle it. I just want to clone these areas out. So it's really important for you to know the strengths of the tools and when to use them. That's what the skill is. Knowing when to use what is the most important thing. And again, I've also zoomed into about 300%. So this is way too much because it's going to be on Instagram. I'm not printing this. I'm not doing any billboard with this. So I can get away with some of the things. I don't really need to be as detailed as I normally would when I'm doing beauty, because this is also not a beauty shot. This is almost like a full-length portrait. So like a 3/4 portrait, so you can get away with certain things because some of them will not be seen at a particular distance. So there's no need to zoom in and then get rid of every single blemish on the skin. But just because I want an overall cleaner image, just trying to be a little bit more detailed. Alright, so zooming out a tiny bit and doing it before and after, you can see all the changes we've made and how it's coming together. So I've gone back to my healing brush tool this time, and I want to heal this area out. She has some beauty marks which I'll leave because those are permanent, those are part of hair. And she doesn't have too many blemishes, so I think I'm just gonna stick with the face area. I'm still using my healing brush on her face and getting rid of that. I think this works well for me. I want to keep some of the texture on her face and heal these areas away, just like that. Go in there and do some healing as well. So the next area I want to correct would be here. So I'm going to switch to my clone stamp tool this time because I want to make permanent corrections. I'm just sampling and painting over these areas. And it's a very low flow. So even though I'm cloning, the effect isn't really as strong as if it was 100%. So I can take my time to let this build up into the areas that I want. Alright, that's just about it. So I want to now get rid of the hair here, and maybe all I'll do is create a new layer because I'm going to experiment with this, and I'm going to sample like an area like this and then just paint it over what the hair is, and now switch to my normal brush tool and make the brush very soft and with a very low flow as well. I'm just going to sample and then just blend in the tones a little bit, just like that. So now that we've been able to get rid of that, all I can do now is just zoom in and add a layer mask onto that particular layer, and then I can erase what's bleeding onto her elbow and the lingerie as well. So I'm going to use not a very hard edge, maybe like 69%, and then just switch it to black and then paint it out. Actually, let me just make it 100%. And then paint it out of these areas and maybe make the edge a little bit more soft. And paint it out just like that. I'm beginning to see that it's showing here, so we're going to switch to white, make the brush smaller and paint it out of this area just like that. Go to her lingerie, switch to black, and now paint it out of the lingerie. I think there was a little bit of excess on the beads, so I'm getting rid of that as well. So this pretty much marks everything that we are doing for healing. So I'm going to group these, Command G, and then just name it healing. And before, after, you can see that we've made a lot of change, but then there's still a lot more to go. So we're moving on to the next step, which is going to be frequency separation.